Today, we're diving into an idea that frames some of the world's most ancient stories not just as history, but as a practical guide for modern life.
I mean, seriously, ever have one of those days or weeks where you're facing something self-doubt, a busted relationship, crazy pressure at work, and you just feel like you're completely lost without a map?
Well, the source we're looking at today makes a pretty bold claim. It suggests that this ancient collection of texts is actually designed to be that instruction manual. It's structured like a practical toolkit, one that maps these timeless stories directly onto the problems we're dealing with right now.
And what's really fascinating is that it's not random. There's a method to it, a clear, four-step process that's used over and over again to bridge that gap between the ancient world and our own.
And here's the pattern. It's actually super straightforward. First, you pinpoint a problem we all know. Then, you find an old story that basically deals with the same thing. From that story, you pull out a real practical piece of advice. And finally, you lock it all in place with a key verse that sums up the main idea. Let's see it in action.
All right, first up, we're going internal. We're going to tackle a feeling I think pretty much every single person listening has felt. That nagging, crippling voice of self-doubt.
You know the feeling. That imposter syndrome, right? You get a new job, a huge responsibility, and your first thought is, oh no, they made a mistake. I am not the person for this. Well, the guide connects this exact feeling to the story of Moses. And check this out. What's so wild is how incredibly modern these excuses are. Moses is basically having a full-blown crisis of confidence. Who am I? That's a straight-up identity crisis. I'm not a good speaker. Total feeling of inadequacy. He's worried about being rejected. It gets so bad, he literally says, just send someone else. These aren't ancient feelings, they're human feelings. So, with all that doubt swirling around, how does the framework address it? It lands on this single, powerful idea. This is presented as the core truth that counters every one of those feelings of, I'm not enough. And that leads to the big takeaway. The idea here is that your weakness isn't a problem to be fixed. It's not a disqualifier. It's actually the entire point. It creates the perfect space for a strength that isn't your own to show up. Your weakness becomes the main event.
Okay, so from our internal battles, let's zoom out a little. Let's look at the challenges between people. Specifically, one of the most painful things we can experience, betrayal.
To explore this, the guide uses the absolutely epic story of Joseph. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On the one hand, you have the deepest betrayal imaginable. I mean, he was sold into slavery by his own brothers. But on the other side of the ledger, you see this unbelievable story of redemption, where he ends up saving the very same people who tried to destroy him.
And this is the pivot point. This is the line Joseph says to his brothers, and it reframes everything. He's not pretending they didn't do something terrible. He looks it right in the eye and says, yeah, you meant this for harm. But then he reveals a much, much bigger picture.
So, what's the practical application for us? Well, forgiveness here is presented as a powerful tool. It's not about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the poison of bitterness. It's a way to say, what happened was wrong, but I'm not going to let it have the final word.
Okay, so we've looked inside ourselves and we've looked at our relationships. For the last example, the framework zooms out even further to a situation where the whole world is telling you to compromise who you are. We're talking about integrity under fire.
And the story used here is intense. You've got these three guys, and the most powerful man in the world gives them an ultimatum, a simple choice: bow down to the statue and violate your deepest beliefs, or be thrown into a furnace. The stakes literally could not be higher.
Their response is just incredible. They say, look, we believe our God can save us. But then they add this phrase that changes everything. But even if he does not. Their integrity wasn't dependent on a happy ending. It was absolute. They were committed to their principles no matter the outcome. And in the story, their incredible stand pays off. They walk out of that furnace without a scratch. But it goes beyond just their own survival. Their conviction actually changes the heart of the king, the very person who tried to kill them. So after walking through self-doubt, betrayal, and massive public pressure, what's the big idea here? What's the core takeaway from this whole framework?
It really boils down to this. The source argues that these stories aren't meant to be read like a history textbook. They're presented as a living, breathing framework, a guide that's just as relevant for our problems today as it was thousands of years ago.
And that kind of leaves us with a final, pretty interesting question to chew on. If you set aside any personal belief or disbelief for just a second, What can we learn from a system like this? A framework that for millennia, people have turned to for finding strength, meaning, and a way forward. What's the value in that? It's something worth thinking about.